Revolver Myths, Episode 2. What we're going to talk about today is favoring the semi-automatic pistol. I see this time and time again. And it's not that I am disillusioned about the realities of these two systems of semi-automatic versus revolver. But there's a lot of points that seem to be made about the revolver that are kind of skewed in a way to make it seem as if it's not as good as a weapon as what it really is. And there's a lot of points that are never talked about. I want to kind of discuss some of those points. Now, what got me thinking about this subject today is I watched a television program this morning on the American Heroes channel. I don't remember the exact name of the program, but I believe it had something like Triggered or Triggers in the title. And basically what they were doing to start off this program is they were discussing the history of military sidearms, and they started off saying that the 1850s Colt single action revolver was one of the first handguns that was very reliable and effective. They progressed down all the way to the P226 in military of modern times, and they were discussing along the way what were good sidearms, and there was so much misinformation in there, and the way they illustrated this kind of bothered me. The first test they had against the two different firearms types was they tested a turn-of-the-century Webley 4.55 revolver, and they tested it against a Luger P08 in 9mm. Both were chambered for 6 shots, and what happened was the guy who was shooting the semi-automatic was a self-proclaimed ranger, and he fired off these 6 shots, and the test was to see who can take out 10 plates quicker, to shatter 10 plates. And the guy with the semi-automatic Luger, he's like boom, 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 boom. He reloaded it like any modern day very good shooter, and took him out much faster than the guy with the revolver. However, the guy with the revolver, he shot his 6 rounds and hit 6 plates. It was a top break action revolver. He opened it up, and then he took 1 cartridge at a time this quickly. And during this time, the semi-automatic actually malfunctioned. It had a jam, and he was still sitting here 1 at a time, about this fast. And the other guy cleared the jam, caught up, and took out those plates quicker. There's a lot wrong with that. The first thing that's wrong with that is certainly in modern times we'd be having a speed loader. A speed loader is going to be much more effective for reloading quicker with the revolver. But even if you didn't have a speed loader, there's no reason why you would sit here with 1 at a time. And he had the ammunition even on a table. What you would do is you'd open up 2 at a time. And you would do it much quicker, trying to actually compete in this competition. 6 rounds loaded, closed, ready to go. I have all 6 in there. So they were kind of making a point where you're illustrating how something is different than what it is. And a lot of us can do this. We do this all the time. And I've even done this before as well by taking this buffalo bore ammunition here and illustrating how it's more powerful in this gun than pretty much any 9mm cartridge out there. And that was just to make a point. It wasn't to say that the 38 Special is more powerful than the 9mm. It was simply to make a point. Because when we get into comparisons, such as cartridge comparisons, what we want to do is we want to take what's average and what's out there and compare that one against the other, rather than take some extreme ammunition and say, well, that one's more powerful. I was watching a Mac video a couple weeks ago, and he did just that. He was shooting a 9mm plus P, and then he was shooting a very low-end 357 Magnum. And I don't mean to get off the topic here, because this does pertain to the same topic we're on. But basically he was saying that the 9mm rivals the 357 Magnum. Well, your average 9mm cartridge is about 350 foot-pounds of energy out of a 4-inch barrel. Your low-end standard pressure about 330 foot-pounds. Your 9mm NATO about 350 foot-pounds. Your 9mm plus P is going to be about 400 foot-pounds. Your average 357 Magnum load is going to be about 600 foot-pounds, and the original 357 Magnum load is going to be about 800 foot-pounds, even out of this 4-inch barrel. So that's just another illustration where somebody is twisting it to make it look like something that it's not. And I've done that. I've done that just to prove points, like I said, with the buffalo bore ammunition. But let's get into a little bit more fair, real comparisons here. Now, one thing that's never discussed, and I never really hear it discussed very often at all, is we always talk about faster reloads with the semi-automatic. But what happens when those reloads are done? Now I'm just going to take kind of a hypothetical situation. What if there is somebody at a distance and they have a 50 round box of ammunition? I'm not sure exactly where this would come into in any practical sense, but I guess it could happen where you are at a distance and you're trying to put suppressive fire downrange and all you have is handguns. And let's say you carry the average, which would be 2 mags, probably anywhere from 10 to 15 shots per mag. Let's just say right here this is a 13 round mag. That's probably about the average of your average semi-automatic pistol. How long would it take to put 50 rounds downrange if I had just 2 magazines? What would happen is I would empty out a mag, I would put another mag in, I'd empty that out. But then how long is it going to take to actually reload this magazine at that point? It's going to take quite a bit of time. I can just about guarantee I'm going to put 50 rounds downrange with this revolver quicker, because I'll shoot 6, I use my speed loader another 6, and then I can sit here and do that 2 round method, load it up 6 shots, empty them downrange, do it again. I don't think it would take all that much time necessarily to put 50 rounds downrange in the revolver. Another thing we get talking about is cartridge comparison in semi-automatic and revolver, and we got a lot of people that say, well, the semi-automatic's just as powerful in most of these cartridges. You can get 45 Super, 10 millimeter, 50 Action Express. But the thing when you got to think about when that comes into play is generally when you get guns that are extremely powerful, you have a lot of special features going into them, like extra strong springs, and you have to make the gun actually quite a bit larger in a lot of these guns. Take for instance like the Kunan 357 Magnum semi-automatic pistol. It's a very big gun. And I'll take for a real example here like the Desert Eagle 50 Action Express. This is a cartridge. There's about 1,500-ish foot-pounds of energy that it fires. And to do that you have a gigantic semi-automatic pistol. Let's compare that to the Ruger 454. If you've ever seen that movie Faster with The Rock, he's got a Ruger 454 Casull. And they also make the M480 Ruger. That 454 Casull will pretty much match that 50 Action Express in muzzle energy. But that particular gun is not much larger than the 686. It's got a little bit beefed up frame and cylinder size, but overall, what's going into the gun is just slightly beefing it up. It's not putting it to this gigantic size that you have to do with something like a 50 Action Express. So when we talk about real power, there's no question that the revolver and anything pretty much named a Magnum is going to be more powerful than most semi-automatic pistols. But we have a lot of people say, oh, this is just as powerful, this is just as powerful. And you know, the 10 millimeter is somewhere between 357 mag and 44 Magnum, but you have a lot of special stuff going into that, where you have a very strong mainspring, and if you convert your other differently chambered gun into like 10 millimeter, you just got a whole big thing that's going on. As a revolver, they build them the exact same. They just beef them up just a little bit to handle those more powerful cartridges. Another thing I want to talk about is the misrepresentation of actual ballistics in semi-automatic pistols. I see it time and time again where a person will talk about ballistics and they will be very well versed in the fact that a snub-nosed revolver has much less power than a 4-inch or a 3-inch, and they'll quote, you know, you're losing half your power out that snubby muzzle. And yet that same person will take quotes of semi-automatic firearms and quote the same velocities no matter what the firearm is. Like today when I watched that television program, there was a guy that was comparing the Desert Eagle to like the Glock 26, and he was showing how the Desert Eagle is too big and powerful for an actual military weapon. But then he was showing how the Glock 26 was very, very effective, and he quoted that this Glock 26 shoots a cartridge that travels at 1,200 feet per second. Now I looked up a lot of the numbers on the ballistics of that, and you know, I knew right away that wasn't right. But basically, these 1,200 feet per second out of a 9mm plus P, you're going to get that basically with a Beretta barrel, almost a 5-inch barrel. That's what you would need. You need a plus P cartridge to do it. Real world numbers of that Glock 26, we're talking about maybe 950 feet per second with a 147 grain, maybe 1,050 with a 115 grain, and then a 115 plus P, we're going to get right around 1100 feet per second. So I find it interesting that people oftentimes quote these exceptional numbers for the ballistics and not take into account barrel length, but the second you pull out a little snub-nose revolver, they're first to tell you you're going to lose all that power. Now, what we often hear about is how there's not enough capacity in these guns, and you're not going to be efficient with it because you might have multiple attackers. Well, multiple attackers is definitely a thing for law enforcement. They're definitely a thing for somebody that's going to confront danger. And in that situation, if I was a police officer right now in 2018, there's no doubt I would rather have a semi-automatic pistol. The extra ammunition we're talking about could save my life. However, as a person that does not encounter danger, and I'm just a regular homeowner and concealed carrier, some sort of revolver, I believe, is more than enough capacity to get the job done correctly, especially if it is a Magnum cartridge. Say what you will about different cartridges and their effectiveness. Anybody knows half of anything knows that a 125 grain bullet traveling at 1500 feet per second is going to have more effect on a target than a 124 grain bullet moving at 1180. That's just simple knowledge. It's going to be more effective out of a Magnum cartridge than something like a 9mm. So if you have a Magnum, like a 357 or 44 Magnum, or something that's very powerful yet controllable, I believe you need less rounds. Now, if the revolver was not something that was a very effective weapon, why was it used by police forces all the way back from the turn of the 20th century for about 85, 90 years? For a long time, it was very effective. And it was much more reliable than semi-automatic pistols of the day. And only since these semi-automatic pistols have become more reliable in the last few decades has it been a real viable option for law enforcement. So that's where we see this increase in semi-automatic weapons for police. Another reason is, the reliability of the semi-automatic does go into the hands of the bad guy, and we definitely need something. As law enforcement, I'm not law enforcement, but as a law enforcement officer, you would need something that has a little bit more firepower for multiple attackers. As just a concealed carrier, I don't see where that need comes in. And the average shots fired, taken by most statistical data, is about 3. And I want to point out something I watched on a video on YouTube, and the guy was talking about revolvers and how they're not good because if you get into a situation where there's a mass shooter somewhere and you're involved in it, he's going to be way outgunned with his rifle, as where you're going to be just as good with your semi-automatic pistol, high capacity, and forget about with that revolver. But I made a comment on that video, and I said, you failed to point out the fact that the mass shooter is shooting at random targets, and if there's just one mass shooter, I only have one target to shoot at. And if I have something on me, let's say I have a 357 Magnum with a 3-inch barrel, something like a SP-101 with a 3-inch barrel, concealable weapon, but that 3-inch barrel almost rivals this 4-inch barrel. Still got Magnum power. I believe that a 3-inch 357 Magnum pulled from concealment will do just fine against one mass shooter. You're shooting at the one bad guy. Plus with Magnum power, you're definitely going to be a little more effective than something like a 9mm 45. Certainly if he's wearing some sort of thin body armor of some kind, I think you have a little bit better chance of penetrating that with a 357 Magnum, or at least breaking something as it hits. You compare like a 45 auto or a 357 Magnum against thin body armor, forget about it. That 357 is going to hit hard. So that's another point to be made, that we're not into this whole multiple attacker thing when it comes to this is not good against a mass shooter. I think it's more than adequate. So what it comes down to in the end is that these right here are too slow to reload. That's why it's not a viable option. And I guess the only thing I can leave you with is, I believe a lot of the statistical data that the average shooting is 3 shots fired. I personally believe a person that is more trained with a revolver, that knows how to shoot it more accurately, I think those numbers will come down. And one more point I want to point out is, look at somebody that actually uses one of these effectively Go look at Jerry Miculek and what he can do with it. Because that's really the level of any person could reach if they trained enough. It's a very effective weapon. And think of it this way. What if you only had one weapon? What if all you had was this revolver and you trained as much as Jerry Miculek trained, and you're very good at reloading? You had moon clips so you could reload even faster. Compare that to somebody that doesn't really shoot their semi-automatic very much. In that situation, which firearm could be more effective? So that's basically what this video is about. Is this revolver really going to compete with this semi-automatic for putting rounds downrange in the average situation? No. However, is this going to fulfill those 3 shots that you might need to fire in the average self-defense situation? Yes. Is it going to have more stopping power per shot than a lot of the semi-automatic cartridges out there? I believe yes. So you have a lot of advantages with this. Ultra reliable, ultra powerful, and enough rounds for the average situation. I know a lot of people want to disagree, and I can agree to disagree. I mean, I'm not saying this is the ultimate better weapon. I'm just saying it's the better weapon for some situations and for some people. And I don't think it's antiquated even in 2018. So that's just my thoughts on it. So comment, share, like, and as always, thanks for watching.